Yesteryear from Carnegie Museum. Very happy to be here today. This was an idea that kind of came out in January when there was plenty of ice, and we think it'd be nice and cool in here, but we're going to have some breeze today, after all. All of you are welcome in our hearts for coming. This is the very first of what we hope will be an annual event, which is a one-room school reunion. A real one-room school right here, and we have someone who went there, in Gloria Countryman. We'd like to welcome her today. Let's give her a hand. Thank you. We've got pictures. Yeah.
That's something we didn't know.
That's right. If there's anybody in this group who has not yet signed in, either for yourself or for your parents who went to a one-room school, we're going to be taking pictures. We promise not to send you any advertising, solicitations, unwelcome. We're here just really to celebrate the fact that Iowa had, among all the states of the United States, more one-room schools than any other state in the United States. So 12,000 by one of the smallest measures, up to 14,000 by another estimate. We're delighted. The state legislature in around 1871 started having the surveyors draw into the maps, the county maps and the township maps, school, school, school. They just surveyed it in, even without a name yet. There were some well before that, including this one, which was actually 1853. And the timbers in this building came from the Elm Grove on Hemlock, just off. If you go up Hemlock, you can see the Elm Grove. It still stands. As I understand,
They run this way.
and we'll let Gloria tell that story. It's an amazing phenomenon. We know that in Round Prairie there's a school, 1837, we've been reading about. Round Prairie in 1837 was still part of Henry County. Our county, Jefferson County, wasn't formed until 1839, and so we kind of grafted on. We got 4 of the townships on the west side of Henry County to become 4 of our townships. And it went all the way to what was then the Native American, the Indian line, as it was called on the maps. So that's the extent that we had from the western edge of Henry County to the boundary lines over an agency. So we're happy that there's so many school alumni here. We would be delighted if you're willing to tell a little bit of your experiences. We know that there are some people, if they walk in here, they're going to see their initials carved on these desks, and we've got the goods on them. And we promise not, there will be no prosecution. The statute of limitations for anything that ever happened at a one-room school is long since passed. So recalling any mischief is okay. We have a few items here. We have graduation certificates, a diploma from this very school in 1929. We'll pass it around. We have a 6th grade promotion that includes a picture of the teacher in this same school in 1927. And this is from the Ledger, 1958. We still call it the Ledger. 1958. This was actually from Blackhawk School number 6. Anybody here in this picture?
That's where I went.
That's where you went. All right, I'm going to give you this photo.
It may be
You'll probably have to give it back to the museum, but you can sign. Okay.
it may be the only school with a basement kitchen.
Number 6?
Yeah.
Ah,
You know.
okay.
Brookville had a basement too.
Which
Brookville had a basement. Linby had one.
Linby had one. Uh-oh, 3 already.
Had a
so
basement.
many community center.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And I know a lot of them have been repurposed. Houses, machine shops, churches, you name it. Anybody else know of a school that's been repurposed?
You remember one Lockridge?
And what is?
Use it for city school.
I've heard they came in once a month. Is that about right? Somebody told me. That's great. Yeah, she's entitled to sign because she went there. So you're entitled to sign. So I want to introduce, ma'am.
Victory number 8 still has, it sits on the original, where it was built, and we have a reunion every year there.
That's great. Hey, give them a hand. They deserve it. They're keeping alive.
Not too many of originals that went there, but we are getting interest from the younger people.
That's great. Well, we'd be interested at the museum to find out more, so we'll talk to you later on. I'd like to introduce Gloria Countryman, who was really the force behind moving this place, lock, stock, and barrel, from over on Hemlock here today.
I was too young to be the moving force when this building was moved here. That's a little bit off, but I did go to 6th grade in this building. It was north of Brookville Road on Hemlock. If anybody knows where Bob Palm lives, it was on the second ridge on Bob's Road, just south of where Bob lives. Also, this building was moved here in either 1961 or 2. There were some citizens really concerned about losing the history of one-room schools. And so there were a group of men that got together and they figured out, got somebody to move it in here to put it on the fairgrounds. For a long time it sat here and they had activities, for pioneer type activities. And then it turned into the location of the open class. And then there was a fair board member who noticed that the ceiling was sinking and said, we got to get everybody out of there, it's going to fall in. Well, that's when Doug Johnson, bless his heart, got me started, and it was about 28 years ago, and I'm still here. He went off to heaven and left me here. Anyway, he and I, and there was one other person, I don't remember now who it was, went to the fair board. They were going to tear it down. They said they'd park a bulldozer out by the side and tear it down if we didn't do something with it. So it opened up again as a historical site, and we've kept it going, and I'm kind of the contact person for the school. We had it checked by an engineer. He said this building would outlast most of the metal buildings that were sitting on the fairgrounds. It was that sturdy. That is a sample of the beams, the rafters. They're up there, and they are elm trees. They're rough-hewn elm trees up there. And you'll notice the screws that are in the ceiling. Well, the ceiling is not going to fall in because it is screwed to all those ceiling beams that are there. When they took the shingles off, there were 5 layers of shingles on this building. That's why it was falling in. 4 layers of just regular asbestos shingles and the original shakes. They took all of that off and fixed the roof the way it should be and put new shingles on. And I found out later, one of the workers said, "Did you know the bell wasn't attached to the building?" I went, "Oh my gosh." Can you imagine if that would have had a windstorm or something and that somehow that fell off, or somebody was up there goofing around? That would have been a hard headache to get, wouldn't it? Anyway, they nailed it down. It's secure. You don't have to worry about the bell hitting you as you walk out the door, okay? We've had people paint the building. The inside has been painted in the last year. We're going to have a new door, or at least a semblance of a new door put on, and the floors will be done. Then I think we've got it pretty well cleaned up the way we want to hopefully last for quite a few more years. That's the goal. I don't know if the Fair Board has gotten their 501c3, which makes them a nonprofit. I know they're working on it. But if I'm going to put a plug in, and we can use any funds that people would like to donate. We've gotten grants, but private donations are always welcome, and you can make them to the Carnegie Museum Foundation, and in the memo line say the Elm Grove School. I'm president of the foundation. I will help you if you need it. But I'm not asking for donation. I'm just letting you know that if you are interested in helping support this building, we would welcome your support. Okay, as I said, I went to 6th grade. They were consolidating the school in 57. So I was at Plum Grove. Where's Jerry? Jerry come back in? Oh, I know. I wondered if he'd be able to make it. Anyway, they started closing the country schools. There were too many of us. They had this great idea of consolidating, but they couldn't take us all at once. So that's when I got moved for 6th grade northwest to Elm Grove. So Plum Grove is no longer there. It's just, Bob Brown has put some new things there on Brookville Road. And there was a seed company there at one time. So I know where it was, but most people don't. K5, one-room school, Plum Grove. 6th grade, Elm Grove. 7th grade, they took a bunch of us in, and I don't know, did any of the rest of you, when you got into the city schools, feel like you weren't welcomed? Thank you. I was afraid, because there was bullying going on. It wasn't, the push shove, but comments. Oh, they're just a bunch of hicks. Do you know what? Did you find out we're smart, if not smarter than some of them? Because as kindergartners, we listened to all those lessons. And by the time we got to there, we knew it all, right?
Country kids were always the valedictorian and salutatorian of the class.
Yeah, that's true. Did you hear her comment? She said a lot of times the valedictorian, salutatorian were country kids. So, but it's interesting. Warren, never mind. You're Lawrence. Werner's back there. There were schools with a radius or a diameter of 2 miles. Every 4 miles there were schools, and they weren't supposed to be any further from people than 2 miles. You couldn't walk further than 2 miles to get to school, or ride a horse, or somebody take you to school. That was to make it convenient for the kids to get there. And I know I'm talking to the choir here, but why did school not start till October or November? Harvest. And we were out early. And in the spring, we got out early because then it was time to do the flip-flop. We had to plant. And the guys, the boys, were the ones that did that. We girls sometimes didn't get involved in that, but some of us did. We were all part of that farm family life to make sure that our family survived. We worked hard, and if we took homework home, that was the teacher's note to say, your kid messed up in school. Otherwise, we didn't have homework because they knew we had to work when we got home. So I think that's it. I could talk a lot because I've got a lot of information, but I'm not going to. The purpose is to hear from you guys. So thank you all for being here. I make no guarantees there's enough cookies. I wasn't sure how many. I do have water. May not be enough, but help yourself if you need some water. It's in the cooler back there. Yes, Rod.
You say this was Elm Grove out on
Hemlock. Uh-huh.
Okay, there was also an Elm Grove north and east of Salina.
Really?
It was right north of where we live. Wasn't that Elm?
I don't remember what, but I remember the school, but I didn't remember.
I thought Mom called it Elm Grove.
I don't know. I thought I had.
North on Tamarack, just off of H 28. It's
North of you, right?
You know what?
North of you.
No, yeah, it's not there.
You have given us a history question to research. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, we're ready. Not so much anymore. Any other comments for me? And then we're going to turn it over to you. You are the people who are going to share your stories. Anything else? As I say, I could talk a while, but I'm not going to. I'll get hoarse. Lisa.
I started out at the Richwoods School, west of Salina. And at that time, the teacher would live with a parent, some of the parents there. So at our house, we had a teacher by the name of Louise Peck. And I went to her the 3rd year she taught. After that, she had gotten enough money so she could go to nurses training. So I really thought she was my big sister because I didn't have a sister or brother. Well, then, after I was in 2nd grade, my parents bought a farm north of Fairfield on Highway 1. That was Black Hawk 7. And there was only 5 of us in the school at that time. I only had 2 years that I had another person in my grade. And when I went to high school, boy, was that a shockaroo. All these kids in one room, and we had just one class. But it was quite an adjustment for me to go from having only 5 of us kids in a one-room school and then to go into high school. But I don't regret ever not going to a one-room school because, like Gloria said, from little on, we listened to all these other kids recite, and yeah, we learned from them. So that's
What's
all.
your name?
My name, I'm Letha Gearing. I used to be a Berg.
Microphone around, so if you want to talk, please do. We want your stories. Don't be shy.
Please tell me.
No, I went to.
You're going to
Just go up the road and back.
go there.
Either way.
I'm Loretta Cryle Deers. I went to Union Number 1, and that school was also called Cracker Neck, and I don't know why. I have it. I don't think it. Anyway, I went to Union Number 1 from kindergarten through 8th grade. In '58, when I was in 8th grade, that's when the school closed. And like I said, it was called Cracker Neck, and I wish there was somebody still around that could tell us why it was called that. It was also called a Dollner school, and I think one of the teachers once was a Dollner. But and Margaret here, she has a book. I should have brought that book. She has a hardcover book on the history of the Lockridge Union Number 1 school and kids that went there and the minutes and things. One year I know we had I guess you'd call it a vaudeville show, the parents and the kids, and we gave it in the community building at that the Salina Church had, and we did it at the Lockridge in the old gym. That was a lot of fun for us kids, a lot of work for the adults, but anyway. It was a good experience, but I'm like Letha, you go from that school to high school. I did visit one day with my cousin in high school, and that helped, but yeah, that's a, culture shock maybe?
For them and us.
Pardon?
For them and us.
Yes, yeah. I never felt like I was bullied. Of course, I was sort of quiet and backward then. I guess I stayed in my own little place, but made friends with a lot of the other kids that were from the country schools and had a good time. It was a neat time.
Thank you, Loretta.
Well, I'm Sandy Brewy Nelson. I went to Cedar Number 3, which was also called Ankrum, because it was an Ankrum family that built the school to begin with. My great-grandpa helped build the first school, and then my grandfather and my dad and me and my sister all went to the same school, and I closed it. 8th grade year, they sent us to town, so we all went. I think we probably all played the same games and everything, but something that I remember most, and I imagine the rest of you do too, Orissa Lyons. She always came in with her hanky, sneaked in the back, and started dusting knobs and everything. She was afraid she was going to catch something from us, I think. But anyway, that was just the mainstay of the school. Whenever you saw her car pull in, it was like, uh-oh, quiet. So that's basically it.
What about diagramming sentences? People have said she made every school she visited do some diagramming of sentences. So some just...
Oh, well, we did that anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, that was just part of it. Kids don't even know that anymore, and they don't know how to write either. So, that was something we all did.
Thank you.
Sandy, did you have to go to the courthouse and Orissa Lyon tested you? If you could sing and do the numbers? I wonder whether it was testing me or the teacher.
Yeah. Jim, introduce yourself.
Good. I'm Jim Stoner. Went to Locust Grove for about 5 years or whatever, and then we went to Buchanan 2 and Buchanan 3. And Buchanan 3 is the only country school that was made out of stone. And what's the funny part, I think, is how many of them around got corn in them or hogs in them or whatever. They tore that one down. It was I think that was one you'd think would last forever. The only thing with the stone, they had a hole in them for drainage somewhere underneath, and it was a neat place for the bees to make nests. So, of course, we thought it was a neat deal to go and take a stick and prod them bees a little bit, but then you take off running, and they could run a lot faster than you could. But it was always fun, and we had 8 in our sixth grade. There was 8 of us in the class, and so we still went to junior high, and it was still scary. So, other than that, that's mine. Anybody else?
How many went to Logan Grove, Jim, when you were there?
Huh?
What was the total number when you were there?
I don't know.
All the classes, any idea?
25. Just guessing.
Yeah, I don't know. I've even got a picture.
I'm Joan Hudgel Saltz, and I went to Buchanan number 3 with all through my grades, but I started in 1st grade. They didn't have kindergarten back then, so I went through 1st through 6th grade, and then 7th grade we came into the Pence building. And one of the things that I do remember, and I have a picture of it, is we had a school bus. And it was a station wagon, and a Mrs. George Lee came around and picked up some of us and took us to school. And so we thought that was really neat to be able to ride in a bus, even though it was a vehicle. But it was fun, and I have, lots of memories of just being able to play with all the different grades. And having some competitions outside and fun. Just a fun memories that I have.
Did she drive the bus because her daughter went to that school?
Well, I think so. Yeah, because, Barbara didn't, she was there maybe in 5th and 6th grade. Right, Barbara was. Yeah, yeah, so.
Joan, who all was with the Ken, and how many kids were in your class? What were their names?
There's 8.
In our particular class? Oh, okay. I just wrote them. Just a minute. I just wrote them down on a piece of paper. Where am I at? Okay. So I actually brought a picture of I don't know if this was the last day of school, but it was close to it. So we had. You want the ones in our class or everybody?
Well, you can go through everybody too.
I'll just read off. I have a group picture, and then I have a picture of the boys and a picture of the girls. And then I have our station wagon school bus down there at the bottom. I'm not sure if it was somebody can tell me if it was a Ford or a Chevy, I'm sure. But I don't know my vehicles. Anyway, Kenny Switzer, Aaron Sheets, Niall Sheets, Tom Larson, Wade Roberts, Harry Dwayne Collett, Kenny Winslow, Larry Hill, Jim Stoner, and then Charlene Switzer, Nancy Larson, Mary Ruth Mazinski, Elaine Switzer, Joyce Can, Barbara Lee, Pam Roberts, and myself. And so that was when we were in 6th grade, and then from there went on into high school.
My name is Jim Hammis. This school here was on my parents' farm, and we went through 8th grade there before it was shut down, and then they moved it in here. In kindergarten, or 1st grade, I guess, the teacher I had ended up being my sister-in-law. It was Jane Mullane, and then I married Rita Mullane later on, and she went on to be a missionary in New Guinea for, her whole life. She came back to Chicago about 3 years ago and passed away there. I got some pictures here of the class of '56. The students that went there, I think there's 17 on this picture here.
You can name them if you want to. They might be familiar names.
There's some I know here. Beulah Polly was a teacher. Bev Pogemiller, or Bev Palm. Patty Sheets. there's a Klein here, but I'm not sure which one it is. Mike Rowe, and there's another fellow I don't know. My brother, Steve, and two of the Hollis girls, Nancy and Linda. And then there's another guy here I don't know. There's three more of the Pauley girls. And my sister Rose, Bob Palm, Nick Pauley, and my sister Carol. So I also have a picture here of the schools from back then. Plum Grove, and also this one right here. I remember Rissa Lyons. She drove I think it was a two-door Chevy, and she was really short. She looked through the steering wheel, and the driveway to the school was up a steep incline. So I know she was looking straight up, couldn't see nothing until it came back down. So, but yeah, we used to. The guys would go down to the bottom of the hill and catch frogs and stuff at noon hour, and the crawdads and stuff down there. I farmed a farm that Charles Junkin owned that was the first neighbor south of the school, and he told me that his grandfather went to school there, and the Indians used to come up and look in the windows. So that's been a while. Okay.
I'm Gloria Swanson Messer, and I went to a one-room schoolhouse. It was called Victory No. 8 School, and it was about 2.5 miles north of Lockridge. And my great-grandfather was the director of the school, and so I go clear back. My great-grandfather had 5 children. My grandfather had 3. They all went to Victory No. 8 School. And then I have 3 brothers. So we had a lot of family members attending that school. We walked to school. It was probably across the field 1.5 miles. If we rode our bicycles, it was, well, you got there quicker on the bicycle. But a lot of great memories. We had about 18 in the school. There was a family that moved in that had 7 children. So that brought our count up a lot. And they reorganized when I was in 7th grade, and I went to Lockridge School for 8th grade. So I got a little transition from a one-room schoolhouse to a class of about maybe 30. And then I went on to Fairfield High School from there. So a lot of special memories. We do have a reunion every year, and we are keeping the school up. We get grants. We've had a new roof put on. We've painted. We have all the original seats and the pictures. No electricity, though. But a lot of good memories, and thank you.
Anybody else want to talk? Oh, okay. I'll go here and then I'll come to you, Joe, okay? There you go.
My mother taught school at Glasgow. Huh?
Your name?
Oh, I'm Dennis Gehring. My mother, Ruth, taught school at Glasgow. Okay, I'm Dennis Gehring. My mother, Ruth, taught school at Glasgow. Glasgow was a different school than the one-room country school. They had 2 rooms, upstairs and downstairs. Well, they went to paint the upstairs, so they took everything off the walls and set it downstairs in the little kids' room. Mom heard these two little kids talking, and there was a picture of George Washington. And one said to the other, and says, I bet you don't know who that is. And she says, why, I know who that is. That's Miss Lyons. But I started at school at Locust Grove number 4, Cross Lanes, and they had a bus, but I couldn't ride it. In those days, if you were within a half a mile of the school, you couldn't ride the bus. And I was 49/100ths of a mile. So at dinner time, kindergarten just went half a day, and the bus driver would take me home then, but otherwise I had to walk to school, which was uphill both ways. And I say that to be funny, but it was. There was a creek run across the middle of the path to school, and it was uphill going home and downhill going, or uphill going home and downhill going to school, but then it went uphill to the school again. So either way you went, it was uphill. But I went there till they closed, and I started at 59, and then I wound up at Roosevelt, and then I wound up at Libertyville. Every one of them I went to has all been disposed of. Wonder what that means.
You closed them down.
Well, I even went to the old junior high, and next year they closed it down.
My name's Joe Hunt, and I went to Center Number 1, which is where the American is right now. And our teacher was Adeline Cole, and her husband was also quite famous in Fairfield because Sergeant Buck Cole, I think he was one of the founding Iowa Patrol employees when they first started the Highway Patrol up. But I believe, and I've just learned something tonight, but I believe that the Gorman farm was the farm that the school was built on. And your daughter Linda and Barbara were there at the same time. Linda was in my class, and Alan Deers was in the same class. And we were there from, 1956 to maybe 60 or 59, somewhere in that range there. But one of the things my brother told me to make sure you tell him is that I'm sure you all experienced how many times you'd get the call, and they'd say, "We're no school today." And it was either because the fuel oil or the furnace wouldn't start, and it was a one-room schoolhouse as well. Or one time my brother said, make sure you tell them about when the skunk broke in one time over a weekend, and we got a few days off for that till it was cleared out. But Adeline Cole was a great teacher. She went on to move into Fairfield and I think taught at Lincoln. And some of the people who were teachers that came there was Bob Glaucke came to us for art instruction, and he'd have us go out in the ditches and get the milkweeds, and then we would paint them up to make it look like birds. And the one that Alan and I probably always was fearing was the school nurse. That was Harriet Conklin. I don't know if you remember Harriet or not. All I can remember was this big lady with a hair in a bun and always wore a big, long, like blue dress with small little polka dots all over it, red lipstick, and these big glasses with the wings on them. And she'd make us all get up there and do this and this and do this and the whole 9 yards to make sure you weren't diseased with something. But it was a great experience because I don't know how many kids we had, maybe 30 maybe or 25. I don't remember, but it was a great place. Great place. Oh yeah, and of course everybody had at noontime. Everybody had duty. Somebody had to do the board, the erasers. Somebody had to sweep out the outhouses. Somebody had to pump water for the big thermos jugs. Put the flag up and down. And the one I always remembered was having to get the floor cleaner when it was a floor just like this, and you threw this sawdust that was red, had oil in it or something, and then you had to sweep it all back up again. But everybody had their job to do, and it was a great place. So.
Can you still smell that floor cleaner?
Probably can. Yeah. So, anybody else here?
Yeah.
Alan?
Alan Deers. I just going to say there were 7 in our class.
Yes.
And we were the biggest class in the school.
Yes.
And it was half of it was Hunts and half of it was Deers.
Yeah. Well, one thing I forgot to say too was center number 1. With center number 1, I was going to brag about it by myself, but now that Alan's here, he'll agree with me that out of all the schools in the area, probably Al and I are the only ones here, are probably the most smartest, most educated, most intelligent students of the whole county. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. There was no doubt about that.
Most modest, too.
And humble.
And humble. But I was trying to think, there was 7 in our class. It was
School there when I was teaching. Your family hadn't moved out there?
Yeah.
That was probably before Adam and Cole then.
There was Joe Hunt, Dick Watson, Dolores Johnson, Linda Leathers, and Dick
Nordstrom.
And Jane Nordstrom. And we were the biggest class at that school at that time. And I remember Mrs. Cole, too. I didn't never call her by her first name, though. No. But you also had to ring the bell. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you had to ring the bell. And the only thing I thought was missing here is the outhouses.
They didn't move those in. Okay, tell who you were, if we need a record of who you are.
Pardon? Alan Deers.
Hi, excuse my sunglasses. I'm going between the reading and the outside, and I left my other glasses in the car. My name is Janice Davison Bannister. I went to Des Moines number 5, and that was located southwest of Libertyville. If you knew where if you knew where the Mount Zion Church was, we were just, Des Moines number 5 was directly east of there, and the Mount Zion Church sat on the corner of the farm that I grew up in. A lot of you have already said things that mirror things that happened at Des Moines number 5, but I was going to read the names of those classmates or schoolmates that were in the school in 1955 and 56. And some of you are related to these people, Letha and Dennis, excuse me, my coffee. Gary Gearing, Verlia Brown, my brother Bill Davison, Mary Kay Barthlow, Gail Swan, Marla Staley, Linda and Judy Fulton, Terry Swan, Sharon Bonnet, Harold Heckert, myself, Dorsey, I guess his brother Harry wasn't in school yet, Janet Swan, Larry Gearing, and Linda Fulton, and Linda and Judy were twins, and Richard Fulton. Our teacher that year was Mrs. Mildred Heston. She lived in Libertyville, and she was my second teacher. My first teacher was Phyllis Wilkinson Kennedy, and our third teacher was Mrs. Mildred, Mrs. McChesney, Jean, can't remember. Jean Parker, what was Mrs. McChesney's first name? Bessie. And she drove an old car. I don't know if it was a Model T, Model A, but it had kind of that bumper seat in the back. And during the winter time, we would bring our sleds to school, and we'd hook it onto the back of her car, and she'd drive around in the schoolyard and take us for rides. And we too had skunks sometimes invade the underneath of our building, and our building was just kind of like this with the blackboard, and we had a big globe that hung down with a big cannonball on the end of it, but was fun running that up and down all the time. We also had over in that corner of the board, it was big crack, and the story was that somebody threw a baseball or a rock at a teacher, and that's what happened. I don't know really what happened, but it was just a wonderful community time of being together, and I look around and I see how many people are related to one another, and that's kind of stayed the same all of our lives, of course. Dennis, his mother, and I think my mother, certainly his father, and my mother went to school together. They were from the same community, and one of the other things I was going to say about, the buses. I went to Des Moines number 5 from kindergarten through 7th grade, and then we went into Libertyville, and then Jean was a classmate in there, and then into Fairfield the following year, because like, I don't know, you talked about how we all weren't going to fit, and I think our class, the class of 1963, and there's several of you here, today we were the largest class at that point in time that had come into Fairfield High School. So we didn't all fit in the balcony and different things like that. So we were the baby boomers. One of the things that you might not realize that I rode in a bus that brought us into high school, but it took us into Libertyville first, and that was a Volkswagen van that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't have any heat in the winter. And Larry Gearing drove that bus. And then when we were in high school, we also had student drivers. And I basically remember the Waugh boys being our drivers. And I think there was only one time that we were ever in an accident. It wasn't our fault. Somebody ran into us out on Highway 34, just not very far from here. And we didn't have any problems with anybody riding the bus because we knew that it was going to get back to our parents probably, but also how much respect we had for those high school classmates when we were in high school and younger. And then when we went to high school, we rode a 72-passenger bus from Libertyville into the high school. And we were on a bus for a long, long time because we went almost halfway or more to Batavia and around by the southwest part of the county. And it was just a wonderful time. And I think that's one of the reasons so many of us are here today.
Yeah, I'm Marilyn Booth Nance. I went to Des Moines Township number 4, which is southwest of Libertyville, which was just the 2 miles more from where Janice had gone, number 5. We used to have competition in the spring of softball between number 4 and number 5. They had a lot of big guys playing softball. And us little kids, and they pitched to everybody, So, yeah, it was kind of scary when you were little. But we didn't have very many that I remember in number 4 at the time. I went from kindergarten through 3rd grade, and then we moved away to Batavia. So then I was in Batavia school, the rest of elementary and high school. But one of the fun things are all the games we played in the wintertime outside. And we always made a lot of homemade ice cream. You'd take it out and bury it in the snowdrift for lunch, have that. But yeah, just lots of good memories. A lot of you have already touched base on that. My mother was a country school teacher before she was married. Back then you couldn't be married when she finished high school and went to Parsons for training and then taught school in number 5 and number 8. And she'd stay in parents' home because she didn't have a vehicle and walk to school just like the kids did. Yeah, and so we just lived, I was lucky we just lived across the road from the schoolhouse. My dad was one of the directors, but yeah. And in our small attendance at that country school at that time, there were 3 Marilyns. I thought that was always kind of unusual that we'd have 3 Marilyns. One of them was in my class and another one was older, so. Yeah, just fun times. So never regret going.
Anybody else? I will. Yeah.
My name's Becky Droz. When I was in school, it was Rebecca Headland, and we went to Limby. I'm thinking it also had a name and a number, but I don't know what it was because it was always Limby to everybody. But I've just got to point some things out. The roll-up map.
Oh, yeah.
Does it work?
I have to hold it, but it works.
Oh, my. Oh, yes. We use that all the time at my school. Another thing I want to point out is the old Victrola. I don't know whether that works. No. But we used to have one, and we'd wind it up to play records on it. And then another thing I want to point out is the piano. We had a piano, and us Headland girls had piano lessons, so usually it was one of us that got to play the national anthem and such. One thing that I see missing is the United States flag. Yeah. And we always, yes, said the allegiance to the flag. And but the Limby School's been gone for a long time. I went all 8 grades there. I took kindergarten and first in the same year, and then I went from 2nd on through 8th. And it was a year or 2 after that they closed it down. And most of the time, I was the only kid in my class. So, and then I went to Packwood, and I was the last class out of Packwood, and they shut that down. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? What should we say your name?
My name's Deanna Laux, and I was 4 years old, and we lived over somewhere. You know, it wasn't in this area right here, but it was probably around Delta or Watchyear out in the country. And my brothers went to school, so I thought, I want to go to school. So I ran after them, and I got to school, and the teacher was really nice. She, I was just 4, and she taught me how to jump and run and do certain things and hop. And then I guess they were really particular, so what they did is the school board somehow heard about it, and they came, and my mother had to come and get me because the school board said I was too young to go to school. So I cried and I cried because it was so much fun, and such a pleasant memory. So Mom, being the wonderful mother she was, took me off and bought me a red wagon. And so, because she knew how much I wanted to go to school. I wasn't that desirous of school later on when I went to college, and, things like that. But this is just so awesome to hear these stories. I mean, this was when I was 4. That was 81 years ago. So there's a lot I don't remember. I don't remember the number of the school. I know it was around Delta, Watchyear out in the country. But listening to all of you and seeing the script up there, and I think it's too bad that our kids aren't taught script now in a lot of the schools because it's so beautiful and it's long lasting. It endures. But they're relying on the computer, which is great, but, this is wonderful stuff. The script is so beautiful. So that's kind of my story, but it wasn't from here in Fairfield, So, thank you.
Lisa has thought of something else.
Yes, I thought of something else when you was talking about Arissa Lyons. I was probably about 1st grade going to school down there at Richwoods. A neighbor, Bob Cummings, and I walked together to school and back. And one winter evening, we were walking home, and here come a car. And Bob says, let's throw snowballs at that car. And I thought, well, I've been taught differently, I think. But anyway, Bob threw a couple snowballs at this car. And his mom always sat at the west window watching us walk home. And guess who was driving the car? Arissa Lyons. that he hit her car with a snowball. And I thought, oh gosh, boy, are we in trouble now. And of course his mom saw him throw it, and of course he caught heck when he got home. And I thought, well, I better tell my folks what we did. And so it was probably about a month later. I mean, we kept looking for Miss Lyons to come to the school, and we figured we would really be in trouble. And sure enough, one day she came sneaking in, you know, and boy, I was shaking in my boots. And anyway, she never said one word, not one word to us or to Bob about throwing that snowball. But talking about two scared kids, I was anyway, and I knew Bob had caught heck when he got home. So anyway, that's my story on Narissa.
Well, this information is actually for the Brookville School. At this point in time, it still has somebody living there. My husband, Jim Saltz, and his folks purchased that schoolhouse in the early 60s and remodeled it to be their home. They moved back from California, and my husband could tell the story better than I can, but when they purchased it, the schoolhouse had a basement, and it had 2 bathrooms, one on each side, one for the girls and one for the boys, and 2 stairs, a stairs to go to the boys' bathroom and a stairs to go down to the girls' bathroom. So then when they purchased it, they took out one of the stairs and then remodeled and had a kitchen there, but they still had the bathrooms in the basement, but they also made one upstairs and had a big room, and they had the chalkboard was still there. They had pieces of that, and had for many years, well, as long as they lived there, it had a slate roof. It was a really heavy roof, but it's a very sturdy house, and it went through, I know, at least one tornado. They had a lot of trees that were around there, and the trees, of course, were gone, but the house was still standing. But so that's about Brookville, a little bit anyway.
Thank you, Joe. My brother went there to the consolidation.
Give it to me.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. I'm Norma Coffin Bond. I went to Blackhawk number 6 school. I started when I was 5 in kindergarten. We had somebody in every class because the Horaces had 12 children, and Earharts had 6. I rode my bicycle to school, pumped my sister on behind me, my sister Sue Bell. My mother was president of the PTA. That was always a big deal. PTA, Christmas programs, box socials. It was the activity that they did every year. They looked forward to. They sure weren't busy like they are today. Anyway, I think I must be older than most of you because they still had the school after I left. But boy, when we had to go to town to take 7th grade tests and 8th grade tests, I was scared to death. But anyway, I don't think anybody ever flunked, did they? Never heard of it. That goes to show country kids are pretty smart. I always thought it was interesting, down at Blackhawk number 8, Shirley Mazinski was my cousin,
and she was the only one in her class, and so they put her in the class up above her. But Marilyn Beekle McGuire tells me she was the only one in her class, and they held her back a year so she wouldn't be alone. Well, anyway, I have wonderful memories of going to school at Blackhawk number 6, and I'm still friends with many of them. But I wasn't afraid when I went to high school. I think my older sisters paved the way. I mean, Beverly was older, and she was a model child. She lived by the book. Then came Wanda, and they wondered what happened because they didn't give her the book. But anyway, I just kind of felt like I had gone to a lot of high school activities and knew my way around at the high school. And then I'd been in 4-H, and one of the things I enjoyed about 4-H, we had a skating party once a month. So between the ag show and that, I knew a lot of people that went to high school when I was a freshman. Wonderful memories.
Just an example of one of those tests. I happen to have, this is from West Virginia, but one of the test questions on history. Discuss fully the reasons why early colonization was confined to the region along the Atlantic coast. How many kids could do that? How many of us could still do it? I don't know. It asked for abbreviations. It had words you were supposed to spell, like delicious, automobile, university, thermometer. You had to pass a spelling test. You had to pass a history test. I can see why you were scared, because there was a lot there. Penmanship, there was a test on that in Virginia. And arithmetic, not math, arithmetic, the 3 R's. Civics. Do you all remember what civics was about? You tell kids today civics, and I'm not sure they know what we're talking about. Maybe we need to reinstitute that. I don't know. English, of course. Probably had to diagram a sentence. I don't know. I always thought that was fun. I like diagramming sentences. And physiology and hygiene, reading, and I think there's one more. Geography. So we knew a lot. And by the time you were an 8th grader, 7th, 8th grader taking this test, it was obvious.
I should say that my first teacher was Mary Evelyn Summer Schaefer. And you know, when you're in kindergarten, you just love your teacher. And every time I'd see her, I just told her how much I loved my teacher. And she says, "Oh, Norma Lee, I was just scared to death." She was just out of high school, and here she was, a teacher. Oh, and I'm going to brag about probably the only thing I ever did, because I wasn't a student. But for that 7th grade test in spelling, I got a perfect score.
I just wanted to ask about the 8th grade test. Is that like graduating from high school in those days, or was that like a national competition, or?
It wasn't a competition. It was proving that you had gotten through to 8th grade. And some kids didn't go on to high school. Some of them went on to jobs. Some of them stayed home to work. So back in the earlier days, they had a choice to go to high school. So I want to review something. Do you know there were 99 schools just in this county? 99 one-room schools. Every township had 8 to 10 schools. And every school had its own board of directors. They did the hiring and firing. They were in charge of it all. Think about that. We're down to a high school, 2 elementaries, and a middle school in the Fairfield School District now, after you got everybody brought in and some of the changes that are being made. I've heard a lot of things that you've talked about. It's true. Country school days, yeah, it was hard times. We worked. If we were a farm kid, you definitely worked. But I don't regret 7 years of my life being in a one-room school. I don't regret it at all. I think it made me a better person. I'm like you, I had 4-H, skating, all that, but still, first moving into 7th grade was a little awkward for a while, until people realized we were okay. But it's wonderful. The memories you've shared today, this has been awesome, and it's going to be recorded and put out there. Where will they be able to see this, Werner? On what, Facebook? Okay, Werner has a YouTube channel. So do we just look for your name and it comes up? Is that do we just look for your name and all your YouTube videos will be there? Werner Elmker. It's Werner with a W, W-E-R-N-E-R and E-L-M-K-E-R. Yeah, if you go to the museum, you'll see the website there. Yeah. So anyway, any other comments? Because I know you're hot, I know you're uncomfortable, and please eat some cookies. I do not need to take cookies home. And there's water in the cooler. One more comment and then we're done.
Well, you talked about penmanship, and my teacher, Mrs. Harrison, was strict on penmanship. And so every year you got to try out a seat, and if it didn't fit, she had her husband make a block of wood to put your feet on. Your feet had to touch the floor. Your arm had to swing on when you made your writing. It had to be. And she, still to her the day, could write just like that, and that's what she taught everyone else too.
I had a child in here yesterday or the day before, and I asked her, can you read that name? Because Loyola Polly was here 4 years ago. Her claim to fame is that she introduced her brother to Beulah while she was in school. She set him up somehow so they went out on a date, and the rest is history. So that's her claim to fame, that she got her teacher married to her brother. But anyway, that child could not read the cursive, and that's sad. But they're all used to the word processing and printing. So anyway, okay, one more comment. Here.
Peterson directed handwriting. Here. Okay. It's called Peterson directed handwriting, and you can find an app, and in YouTube you can practice that handwriting if you look it up. Peterson. Did you want this? Did you want this? Oh, thank you.
There were several of us that took 2 grades in 1 year, I think because of the low count, because I was only 17 then when I graduated from high school, but I think it was like either second and third or somewhere in there, and there were several of us, we've commented that we took 2 grades in 1 year.
Yeah, if you didn't hear that, that was probably for the teacher's convenience. I know we could go on and on. We could be here for the next 3 hours, but I don't know about you, but I'm melting. I'm like the West. I'm melting, okay? So, one last thing. There are some things we did in country school they are still doing today. It's just under a different name. We mentored each other. They're mentoring in the schools. We did a lot of things together that has a different name today. So maybe the old times weren't so bad after all. And we are proof. Every one of us, we are proof that we did well and are still doing well. Thank you all for coming, and please eat.
We invite you to Carnegie Museum. Please come. We have pictures of many of the one-room schools. We welcome more. We want to have a display just for the one-room schools because it is such an important feature of Iowa history. Once again, the largest number of one-room schools of any state in the United States is right here, and you're part of that. So we want to thank you. Congratulations. Please come visit us. Yes, if you haven't signed our roster for the day, you have 2 invitations. One, to go ahead and use the chalkboard. No penalties will be assessed for penmanship at all. We really would like to take some pictures of that, actually. So if you have yourself or a family member that you want to have on that board, please go ahead and sign. And also, we have a roster coming around on a regular 8.5 by 11. It helps us know who you are, and we can brag about you. So thanks a lot. We appreciate you coming out on a hot day. Thanks again.